In a world where the moniker GOAT is handed out like the term service animal to pet alligators, there is still one man you can bestow this sobriquet on that bucks the trend. His name is Shohei Ohtani, and in this video essay I'm going to cover every single facet that makes his free agency, like the ballplayer himself, the most interesting case we've ever seen. No matter how you feel about the salaries for athletes, I think we can all agree that it's exciting to pontificate on just how much money it will take to land Shohei Ohtani. Because if he is out to maximize his earnings, he could sign a contract surpassing the total value of the World Series champion Texas Rangers middle infield. And that includes two players, the second and third place MVPs for this past season, Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, who of course finished behind Shohei himself. Historically speaking, there is just no precedent for what Ohtani's contract should look like. He's both the best hitter available in this free agent market as well as the best proven pitcher. And with all due respect to Babe Ruth, who absolutely revolutionized the offensive approach that we still witness in today's game, what Ohtani is accomplishing on the field is simply something we have never seen. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of what Ohtani's contract might look like, let's take some time to geek out over Ohtani's accomplishments thus far. Now, obviously there's the hardware, a Rookie of the Year in 2018, and MVP awards in 2021 and 2023. Becoming the first player in history to win 2 MVPs by unanimous decision. The only thing that stopped Ohtani from three-peating as the MVP was Aaron Judge swatting 62 home runs in 2022 while putting up the first full season WRC plus over 200 since Barry Bonds in 2004. So in 2022, Ohtani had to settle for a second place MVP finish as well as fourth place in Cy Young voting. So over the last 3 years, while accumulating the most WAR in baseball as a two-way player at 26.4, Ohtani is a 2-time MVP, a 3-time All-Star, and a 2-time Silver Slugger winner, winning it in 2021 and 2023. In fact, in 2023, he was the best hitter in baseball, logging a 180 WRC plus, 6 percentage points higher than even Aaron Judge. Over the last 3 seasons, his 157 WRC plus trails only Judge, Yordan Alvarez, and Mike Trout, and he sits just ahead of Juan Soto and Freddie Freeman. Since entering the league in 2018, his 146 WRC plus is 7th best, besting hitters like Ronald Acuna Jr., Bryce Harper, Alex Bregman, and Fernando Tatis Jr. His potent blend of power and speed holds very few contemporaries. In 2021, his first MVP campaign, Ohtani produced one of only 4 seasons ever in which a player amassed at least 45 home runs, 25 stolen bases, and 100 each of runs and RBI, joining the likes of Larry Walker in 1997, Barry Bonds in 93, and Chipper Jones in 1999. Since Ohtani's first season, only 6 players have accrued 150 home runs and 80 stolen bases: Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, Jose Ramirez, Ronald Acuna, Marcus Semien, and Francisco Lindor. While Ohtani was very good from 2018 to 2020, he's really kicked it into another gear since, slashing .277, .379, .585, and accruing the 12th most WAR amongst position players, sandwiched between Manny Machado and Austin Riley. And that's despite incurring the designated hitter penalty that assumes he's being utilized as a DH because he would provide negative value in the field. That penalty basically has docked him 1.5 WAR per year. Since 2021, Ohtani has the 9th best OBP in baseball and the 2nd highest slugging, sporting a 13.6% walk rate and an isolated slugging percentage of .307. Isolated slugging, or ISO for short, is calculated by subtracting batting average from slugging percentage, and it is used to communicate a hitter's extra base hits per at-bat. The league average ISO is 166, a number Ohtani comes pretty close to doubling. To highlight just how prodigious Shohei's power is, in the StatCast era, which starts in 2015, only Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, and Shohei Ohtani have hit multiple balls at an exit velocity of 119 miles per hour or harder. What more could you want from a middle-of-the-lineup bat? You want OBP? He's got it. You want slugging? He's got it. You want speed? He's got it. Now, as mentioned, if he was purely an offensive player, even if he was solely a designated hitter, his 50th percentile projection for 2024 would be roughly 4.5 WAR, a number he's surpassed 2 times in the last 3 years, averaging 5.2 WAR over that time span. But again, that's only if he didn't pitch. Have you heard he pitches too? As is the case with his offensive skill set, Ohtani has hardly any equals on the mound. He is one of only 12 starting pitchers to average 96 miles per hour or better with his fastball since he broke into the league, and that's with a minimum of 450 innings pitched. His Stuff Plus metric, which measures velo, movement, spin rate, and release point, and tries to quantify just how nasty a pitcher's stuff is, ranks as the 4th highest in the major leagues, trailing only Jacob deGrom, Corbin Burnes, and Garrett Cole, and that's since 2018. Over the last 3 seasons, he's been the 12th most valuable pitcher by Fangraph's FIP-based WAR, just behind Carlos Rodon and Luis Castillo, and just ahead of Zach Gallen, Max Fried, and Framber Valdez. By pure runs allowed, he's been the 7th most valuable pitcher in baseball. It's sincerely not that much of an exaggeration to say that if Yordan Alvarez could pitch like Garrett Cole, you'd have Shohei Ohtani. Now, if you were here just for the hype, you may want to click off this video, because I want to throw a 9-figure wet blanket on the value of Ohtani's next contract. Now, does it ultimately matter if Shohei's contract beats the cumulative GDP of the 3 lowest producing countries in the world? No. But if you too like to play armchair GM, the following may be of interest to you. And please let me know your best guess as to what Ohtani's contract will be in the comments. Shohei is one of just 2 pitchers to undergo multiple major elbow surgeries in the last 6 years, with Dustin May being the only other player who comes to mind. After successfully returning from Tommy John in 2018, Ohtani underwent an internal brace procedure in September of this year, which is simply an alternative to Tommy John. The extent of damage that was repaired during the second procedure is unclear, but that just may be semantics at this point, because a second Tommy John carries a pretty significant stigma, as the return rate from a second go-around is about 70%, and the results in terms of performance have varied wildly. The most successful data point we have for a 2-time Tommy John recipient is Nathan Eovaldi, and Jameson Taillon, Daniel Hudson, Joakim Soria, and Chris Capuano provide optimism as well. But the most pessimistic data points include guys who have never again thrown another pitch in the big leagues, like Josh Johnson and Jared Parker, while Chris Medlin, Brandon Beachy, and Brian Wilson are also cautionary tales that may scare suitors away. So since Ohtani's elbow may be as bulky as a McDonald's McFlurry machine, and there's a chance approaching 30% he doesn't ever pitch again, it's not impossible that this injury has cost Ohtani around $200 million. Let me explain. First, to set a baseline, we'll pretend Ohtani finished 2023 healthy, and we'll navigate this process as if we could have assumed average health for him as both a hitter and a pitcher, as well as an average decline in age-based performance throughout his career. Now, due to the rigors of both hitting and pitching, maybe that's foolish. But given this scenario, he would have finished 2023 with over 10 WAR, and I think he could have amassed somewhere in the 50 to 60 WAR range over the next decade as a two-way player, putting his strictly performance-based contract value in the $450 to $540 million range over those 10 years, using a $9 million per WAR formula. We can also come to a similar conclusion by breaking up Ohtani into 2 players. First, the hitter. If we're looking for comparable contracts, there are no perfect open market comparisons. Ohtani is a DH only, and that renders mute the contracts that Judge and Betts signed, as they're 2 of the game's best hitters who are also plus or even plus defenders. However, Yordan Alvarez signed a 6-year, $115 million extension that will pay him $26.8 million each of the last 3 years of his deal, which would have been the first 3 free agent seasons of his career, meaning this was an extension that bought out the last 3 years of his arbitration, possibly indicating that Yordan left some money on the table. There are also the contracts of Manny Machado and Xander Bogaerts, who are decidedly not the caliber of hitter that Ohtani is, but they provide a similar overall value when their defense is folded in. Machado inked an 11-year, $350 million contract extension, while Bogaerts got $280 over the same time span. In both cases, the player was headed into their age 30 seasons, 1 year older than Ohtani will be next year. In the 3 full seasons leading up to these contracts, excluding 2020, Machado accrued 14.0 WAR and Bogaerts amassed 16.2. Yordan Alvarez, like Machado, tallied 14 WAR but in less games due to knee injuries. Taking the average AAV of Machado and Bogaerts' contracts, plus the AAV of the last 3 years of Alvarez's extensions, brings us to an average annual value of about $28 million for Ohtani. As another data point, we can consider JD Martinez, who received $22 million as an AAV back in 2018 as a comparable hitter, but as a much worse base runner and a true negative in the field. $28 million sounds right for Ohtani, the theoretically healthy designated hitter. And while I don't think we'd ever see a 10-year contract for a designated hitter-only player, Ohtani runs and could arguably play the field if he didn't pitch. On the mound over the last 3 years, Ohtani's provided value on par with Carlos Rodon and Luis Castillo. Rodon signed a 6-year deal at $27 million a year, and Castillo signed an extension that bought out his last year of arbitration and that will pay him $24.2 million annually over what would have been his first 4 free agent seasons. Meanwhile, the ink on Aaron Nola's 7-year deal to stay in Philly for $24.6 million annually is still drying. Ohtani can't quite hold a candle to Nola's workload, but he has been more valuable on a per-inning basis than Philly's workhorse. Ohtani has also been worth more than both Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery over the last 3 years, 2 pitchers who are thought to command AAVs of around $28 and $22 million respectively. I think if Ohtani were just a pitcher and healthy, he would beat Rodon's contract due to the longer track record of recent performance and health. But since Ohtani is currently not healthy, and if he were just a pitcher, he would probably get the requisite 2-year deal that would pay him to rehab in 2024 and then come back in 2025 for another shot at free agency. But the mean of this group's AAV of 25.2 can work for this exercise, and we can combine it with the $28 million AAV we got for Ohtani the hitter, and we get $53.2 million per year, or very close to the top end of the 10 years, $540 million estimate we talked about earlier. You could argue he'd get 25 as a hitter and 30 as a pitcher for 55 per year, but you get it, we're in the ballpark. If teams wanted to spread the deal out a little longer to minimize the hit to their CBT, they could go 12 years and $620 million, and I think that was probably where it would have landed if he had been fully healthy. Of course, Ohtani's not healthy, and because the second Tommy John cuts his projected innings pitched over the next 10 years by about 40%, with those innings being of lesser value as well due to the theoretically diminished stuff, and it's at least possible that his offensive performance in 2024 suffers because he is not at full strength, his projected WAR total over the next 10 years drops by about 20. Because of these factors, it's probably a much safer assumption that he could only accrue 30 to 40 WAR over the next 10 years, putting the performance-based valuation somewhere in the $270 to $360 million range, lopping about $180 million off his earning potential. But there's no reality in which Ohtani signs for less than an annual average value of $40 million. If he can't come back as a starting pitcher, he could still be a high-leverage reliever, or at least a long relief pitcher. If he ends up not being able to pitch, do you doubt that he could convert to at least an average major league outfielder? I don't. The X factor that we still need to consider is the money a team will rake in by simply rostering Ohtani. Consider that the Angels saw attendance hikes of 3,800 on average when Ohtani was on the bump, at an average of $37 per ticket and $100 spent on concessions and merchandise per attendee. A team could expect to generate over $6 million more over the course of the season just from 12 Ohtani home starts. That alone would cover the salaries of 8 players on the roster making the league minimum salary. And on Ohtani promotion item nights, the Angels saw increases of 11,000 fans per game on average. Those numbers have real impact on the value of advertising space. But the real kicker is that whatever team gets Ohtani gets to market to Japan, a country with 125 million people. For Ohtani to be so intrinsically linked to Babe Ruth, widely considered to be the best baseball player of all time, is a huge point of pride in Japan. You see, the on-field baseball product in the NPB is said to be akin to that of AAA baseball, and so for Ohtani to come over and dominate so thoroughly on both sides of the ball means a lot to the people of Japan. To that point, where opening day games on ESPN drew about 2 million viewers stateside, Ohtani's opening day game drew 6.2 million viewers in Japan. When he participated in the Home Run Derby, 21 million people watched in Japan compared to 7 million people in the US. Angels games were broadcast in Japan with cameras focused solely on Shohei, even when he was in the dugout. Since Angels games drew more viewers in Japan, that's why you would see Japanese banner ads behind home plate during their games. An estimate in The Athletic states that Ohtani made the Angels $70 million before he threw a single pitch or swung the bat. Now, I can't speak to how teams will value this in Ohtani's contract negotiations, but it could theoretically net Ohtani quite a bit more in guaranteed money. For a deeper dive into this phenomenon, go watch Baseball Doesn't Exist's video on this very subject. It came out while I was writing this and does a much better job covering the non-performance related revenue Ohtani attracts for his ball club. Boiling it down, what will Ohtani's contract look like? Because of the immense risks and benefits of this deal, the structure of this contract is going to look wild. Obviously, it will be extremely incentive-laden with escalators based on innings pitched, all-star appearances, Cy Young and MVP finishes, and the like. And although it would be extremely rare for this type of contract, a potential rest of career deal for a true major league star, there could be multiple opt-outs in the first heavily front-loaded 3 years of the deal. Maybe a guarantee of 170 over the first 3 seasons with opt-outs after the second and third is where it starts. This gives Shohei the shot of sticking the landing perfectly on his walk year again and gives him another chance at free agency in his age 30 and 31 seasons. To trigger those opt-outs, he'd have to reach 150 innings pitched in 2025 or 330 innings pitched cumulatively between 2025 and 2026. Meanwhile, 120 innings pitched in 2025 could escalate the first 3 years to a total of 180 million. If he fails to reach 210 innings pitched between 2025 and 2026, it would trigger a 7-year, $280 million deal. By reaching 210, 220, 230, or 240 innings pitched between 2025 and 2026 would make the last 7 years worth $290, $305, $320, or $340 million respectively. With a $20 million signing bonus, this guarantees him $470 million over 10 years, with various escalators creating a potential to earn $536.5 million over the decade. If a team wants to go to 12 years, maybe they settle at $520 in guaranteed money prior to any incentives. Whatever team ends up landing Shohei will immediately be much better, much more exciting, and much more lucrative, because this is the greatest baseball player the world has ever seen and may ever see. And whatever he ends up getting paid, every penny will be earned, and it may somehow not be enough. Ohtani, as a ferocious competitor, has laid to waste any already lofty expectations bestowed upon him by anyone other than himself. But that's what makes him special. That's why he should be cherished and revered. And that's why Shohei Ohtani is the one true GOAT.